Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We have folks from all over Canada and the United States joining us today, from as far away as Quebec all the way down to Texas and Florida and Southern California. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend it with Flycast partners. Today's webinar presentation, Automating Discovery for CMDB, presented by Kyle Hamilton. Kyle is a software engineer for Flycast partners with over 25 years experience in the IT service management space. His career started as a network engineer for Pro Systems and was quickly hired by Network Associates as a professional services consultant, where he delivered ITSM solutions around the world for thousands of customers. Kyle's primary focus is on ITIL processes and architecture. His extensive knowledge of CMDB and asset management projects, and also deals with the automation and management solutions such as BMC Client Manager and BMC Discovery. Kyle has been a certified consultant for Front Range, Peregrine Software, BMC Remedy Force, Service Desk Express, BMC Discovery, BMC Client Manager, as well as ITIL certified in a Microsoft MCSE and many others. Before we get started, Kyle, let me introduce our organization. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience, founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in the IT space. We took the best ideas from these collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in ITSM, ITAM, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practices. Our professional services can easily scale up or down in order to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing administration and support service offerings will enable your organization to focus on your normal day-to-day operations, saving you both time and money. I invite you to take a look at our brand new website. Actually, this is the first day of our launch, ironically, and feel free to call us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. This is one of many, many weekly webinars that we host here at Flycast Partners that you can see on our first page. Please take the time out of your day to look at some that may interest you or your coworkers and sign up today. Also, utilize our website for industry white papers and look for some training that you may need or are looking for as far as ITIL is concerned, or IT tools, assistance with professional services. And we also invite you to reach out to us directly at info@flycastpartners.com with any questions or concerns that you may have. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this presentation over to Kyle Hamilton. Kyle, it's all yours, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rich. Let me take just a moment to welcome everybody. I'm going to share out my screen here. And I've got just a few slides we're going to go through just to provide a little background, and then we'll quickly take a look at the actual solution in action. So, as Rich mentioned, today's discussion is focused on automating discovery for the CMDB. For those of you that are on the phone that have ever attempted, construction or maintenance of a CMDB, you probably realize very quickly it's a very daunting task. Of all the ITIL processes, I would say it's probably right up there at the top in terms of being able to conquer it and keep it accurate and keep it up to date the way that it needs to be. So it's almost inherent upon companies to look to some type of automation tools to assist them in that effort, to avoid the need to have teams of resources devoted to managing assets, keeping up with what's coming in, what's going out, as well as all of the changes that are constantly occurring within the environment that make that task even more difficult. So there are a couple of key points that I hope after today's presentation that you come away with in terms of the BMC Discovery solution. Number one It's deployed as an appliance. What that means to you is it's quick and easy to deploy. My demonstration today, every customer installation around the globe runs from a virtual appliance. Some of those elect to have a physical appliance if you so desire, but in either case, that physical or virtual appliance is deployed to the customer fully configured, fully enabled, ready to go. All it needs is an IP address and you're ready to start working. So it's quick and easy to deploy. You're going to find there's a very fast return on investment, and you're not having to spend time configuring servers, configuring the environment. You can drop this appliance virtual on any device that you so desire. The physical appliance, of course, can be deployed to any location you desire. And so it provides a very fast return on investment in that with BMC Discovery, you're able to start seeing actual results back in minutes and hours rather than weeks and months when you're talking about having to configure an environment, configure servers, get it installed and configured. So this is something that's easily deployed in customer environments regardless of which path you take, physical or virtual. Second big point is BMC Discovery operates in an agentless capacity. There are agent-based tools all over the place that typically handle the client side of the environment, which is typically the first piece that customers get a handle on is the desktops and the laptops and the workstations that customers are calling about. And you'll frequently see some type of agent that's deployed to those machines to allow them to discover those devices as well as manage those devices. The key with BMC Discovery is it is agentless. It runs from that central appliance. There's no agents to deploy throughout your network, which also speeds the return on investment and time to implementation, and that you don't have to start installing additional components on every machine. There is a Credentials Vault. This is important because a lot of what's being done in terms of discovery of these devices incorporates critical information, important information, intellectual property for the company. You don't want those IDs and those passwords freely made available for anybody. This allows you to input those credentials into a vault, into the BMC Discovery tool, so that nobody else, once input, they're in hash, they're encrypted using 250-bit key encryption, and nobody else from that point forward can read those credentials with the exception of BMC Discovery for actually going out and doing what it's instructed to do. So you don't have to worry about all the keys to the kingdom being placed in one location that everybody has access to. You can have those individual landowners or those people that are responsible for different parts of the network apply or supply their credentials into that vault without anybody else having access to them or seeing them. And now we can use those to interrogate the necessary devices without freely floating around IDs and passwords that everybody has easy access to. It can, through this agentless discovery, discover applications on the devices. It can discover the devices themselves, and most importantly, it can also discover the relationships and dependencies that exist between those hosts. And that leads into this next slide, which kind of talks about the benefits of having that relationship information. Being able to understand not only what hosts are on the network, but how are they communicating, how are they interconnected, how are they dependent upon each other, so that when you're talking about FootPrints, for example, one of those features is an impact analysis for looking at change requests. That impact analysis relies inherently on that relationship and dependency data to be able to determine what's upstream and what's downstream from that impacted device. So when you talk about, not only managing the hosts and just keeping track of the assets themselves on your network, now we're going an entire level deeper where you're talking about knowing those hosts and understanding how they're connected and how they're related. And when you start talking about that volume of information, the level of detail we're talking about, that's where, again, the automation tools become almost critical, enabling you to manage a CMDB with perhaps a half or one full-time resource, or a full resource, rather than having to devote entire teams, because you've got a tool like BMC Discovery that can help automate 85–90% of that data capture and enable those staff resources to manage that additional 10%, rather than having to worry about all the base data that would typically have to be captured. It frees you up from reliance on subject matter expertise. So what you'll see in a lot of these graphical diagrams, especially when it's showing dependencies and relationships, these are things that many organizations have the ability to determine, but it's usually reliant on the senior technicians, those people that have a long tenure and have spent a long time in the organization and have this information in their head. What BMC Discovery allows you to do is build those models and build those relationships into the tool, so that you're no longer reliant upon having to find that one person that can provide that expertise. Everybody that has access to FootPrints and the CMDB can then have the same level of access to that expertise, no matter whether they're day one employee or if they've been there for 15 years. The other big consideration to keep in mind is BMC Discovery is focused on the data center. As I mentioned before, there are typically two distinct parts of the environment for most customers. There's the client-facing side, where you're dealing with laptops, desktops, and devices that users are actually calling about and reporting problems on. And then you have the back of house. You have the infrastructure, the data center, the routers, the switches, the hubs, all the network devices that users aren't going to be calling on and telling you this Cisco switch is down or this Catalyst switch is down. But those are things that are running the backbone of the network, and many times more critical than the actual customer devices. So with BMC Discovery focused on this particular area of the network, what it tends to do is fill in those black holes and those dark spots in the network that typically aren't discovered and aren't typically managed to this degree, so that when you combine the two, the client management with the BMC Discovery of the data center, it gives you that full picture from an endpoint user that's calling about a problem all the way back to the servers and the services and all of the infrastructure devices that they may be traversing to get to that particular service. It's also important to note that all this information that is captured from the Discovery solution is synchronized with the FootPrints CMDB. So that all of this information that's being captured, whether it's through BMC Discovery focused on the infrastructure, or whether you're using client management for the desktops and laptops and managing those that way, or with some other tool, you have the ability to take all of that data and synchronize that into the CMDB, so that as users are calling into the service desk and logging incidents, submitting change requests, that information related to those servers, those desktops, those routers, whatever it is that you might be dealing with, is available directly with the CMDB, within the CMDB, without having to spend the time and the effort to manually capture that data and focus on gathering those details. So with that, let me drop out of the slides, and we'll quickly take a look at the BMC Discovery appliance and talk a little bit about what it provides and how it functions. Now, what we're looking at here is the BMC Discovery Console, and as I just mentioned, same exact way you would apply it in your environment or install it in your environment. You'll notice down here, I've got a virtual system that's running. All I did was simply copy this virtual system to my laptop, and I booted it up, and it grabbed a DHCP address, which you'll see right here. It shows me where I can access the device at this 234 address. In your environment or most production environments, that of course will be a static address that gets assigned rather than a DHCP address that's picked up randomly. But the key is, you drop this virtual machine into your environment, provide that address, boot it up. Once you've got that address, this becomes, this interface here becomes inconsequential, and I can then go to that URL or that IP address in any browser and access and log into the console to start looking at data, running reports, scheduling discoveries, everything I need to do. So the installation for your environment would literally be no different. It's just a matter of copying that virtual system onto the designated physical box you'd like to place it on, giving it an IP address or allowing it to pick one up, logging in and start configuring the discovery of your environment. And that's why they talk about, results in minutes and hours versus days and weeks, in that you're not spending time configuring the database, configuring the application. You simply copy it, boot it up, access it through the browser, and you're ready to go. So in the majority of cases where we deploy BMC Discovery at a customer site, within 2 hours, we're already running discoveries and having results back on that customer's network because we're not spending time in that deployment phase. Now, let's talk a little bit about what that entails. So I'll start with, management of the application and the discovery process itself. Now, I'll see here in my existing environment, I have multiple discovery processes that have been defined. And most customers will do the same. You're not simply going to have one big discovery that scours the entire network all at once. You're going to break it up logically, whether it be subnet by subnet or application by application or geographical region by region, so that you can have a library of discovery processes that are focused on particular areas of the network and looking for particular pieces of data. The other reason that you would typically want to break these discoveries up into multiple discovery processes is that not everything in your environment carries the same level of criticality or has the same level of criticality associated with it. Some devices, more critical, may need to be discovered every few hours, while other devices, less critical to the organization, may be simple enough to keep up with them every 24 hours or once a week or even less. So that way it allows you to break up the discovery processes in your environment based on that criticality, if you desire, so that you're not scanning everything in the same way looking for the same information. These discovery processes can be focused on particular areas of the network, looking for particular pieces of data on a particular schedule, while focusing on other areas at different times, different schedules, and looking for different pieces of information. So it allows you to maintain a library of those things, whether they run on a schedule, or you'll also notice through here, if I wanted to immediately initiate a rescan of those 157 IP addresses on this particular subnet, I could do so right now if I wanted to make sure I'm looking at up-to-date information. Now, all of the devices that you see listed in these discovery scans, even though it's agentless, as I mentioned, we have a Credential Vault within BMC Discovery. And what this does is it stores all of the login IDs and the passwords that are necessary to be able to run discovery on all those devices that we've designated in those discovery scans. And you'll notice up at the top, it essentially shows here all of the different login types that are available for the different types of devices, everywhere from Unix boxes logging in with SSH or Telnet or remote login, Windows WMI scans. We talk to vCenter and vSphere via their API directly, so we can gather all the information from virtual environments within a single API call. We can SNMP sweep the network for details. We even go as far as allowing you to log in directly to Cisco equipment, HP equipment, EMC storage centers, as well as mainframe and even mid-range systems like IBM iSeries AS400 devices. So this literally gives you the capability to log in and interrogate all kinds of data center devices, just dependent upon the credentials that are provided. And you'll see those can be stored down here in the vault. You'll notice you could have one set of credentials that works across all devices. You may need to have, if you've got 20 different discovery scans, different parts of the network, different types of equipment, it may be necessary to have 20 different sets of credentials and 20 different IDs and passwords. The key is that you can input all of those into the system, right? I can tell it when to use it. Only use this password and ID for SSH login, or only use it for SNMP queries, whatever the case may be. Once entered, you'll notice that the passwords that are put into the vault are encrypted. So nobody from this point forward, other than the person entering it, knows what that credential is. That way, not all the keys to the kingdom are stored here where everybody has access. You can have those users or those individuals that are responsible for different parts of the network, maybe SQL databases or Oracle databases or all the application tier servers. They can log, you can provide them access, allow them to enter the credentials here so that they're stored, and we can then use those credentials to interrogate and discover those devices. But once they're entered and encrypted and hashed, nobody else ever has access to those credentials through the console. Nobody can ever see what they were. Nobody knows what they are except the application, so that we can use those to do the interrogation without having everything co-located in one database, where if somebody compromised this, they would immediately have access to be able to log into switches and routers and servers, etc. Now, it's important to note that when you key in these credentials, that they are attempted in the order in which they are defined. In other words, if I'm scanning for 254 devices and I have 254 sets of credentials in my vault, then it's going to start at the first set and it's going to attempt to log into that device. If it doesn't work, it's going to move to the second set and the third, and so on and so on. So it'll eventually, if you've got a set of credentials in that vault that will allow you to log into that device, it's eventually going to find it. Now, obviously, it's going to be a lot less efficient if you have to try 254 sets of credentials on each of 254 sets of devices. So that's where, again, you want to break these things up so that I can schedule one discovery for one subnet and perhaps provide one credential that'll work on all devices on that subnet. It's going to make it much faster. It doesn't have to iterate through everything, and you're going to get the results back much faster. But the nice part about that is if you don't know what set of credentials will work, in a lot of cases, customers don't. They have so many devices out there, and they know they have so many sets of credentials, and one of these will all work on something, but they're not sure which one. At least you can get through and get logged into those devices. It may take a little longer for the discovery to complete if it has to try 50 different sets, but that way, as long as you have a set of credentials that will work, it'll eventually find those and allow you to do the discovery. Now, the other piece within management is knowledge of what we call, or what they call patterns. I call them fingerprints, kind of the same thing. And this is what allows you to actually discover applications and discover services on the network. Not the hosts themselves, but the actual processes and running applications. So every month, BMC produces what's called a technology update. You'll see it shown at the top here as a TKU. They come out monthly. You'll see they're flagged with some kind of a cryptic labeling for a date, maybe Mayan. I'm not sure exactly what that is. But every month, you can download and install a technology update that provides the latest fingerprints for the latest software, latest versions of Windows servers, SQL, all your off-the-shelf third-party apps. What that allows you to do is then be able to come in and look at those fingerprints or look at those patterns and determine which ones are applicable for your environment and which ones aren't. Some customers want to take those patterns, for example, and scan everything on their network, right, to try and find one of those applications on their network. Other users, they may want to simply activate or turn off all of the applications that they know they're not concerned with and they know they're not looking for. So BMC, as of today, has approximately 17,000 plus pattern modules that are provided to customers. And again, that goes up by a couple hundred every month. You'll notice in my instance, I only have roughly 2,000 of those active. meaning there may be a lot of software for Unix, there may be some software for Linux that are supplied in those patterns, and if I know I don't have those operating systems, then I simply don't have to activate those patterns. Again, it's much like the credentials, it's going to save time and speed everything up. If I'm not looking for everything and just looking for what I know is there, then that discovery process is going to happen in a much, much faster methodology. Now, when you go through and you discover create these discovery scans, you supply the credentials. Now you've got all the knowledge to know, okay, here's all the different applications we're looking for and how they're configured. Those discovery processes run on that schedule, and they start immediately providing data back to the customer through this data interface. And you'll notice it breaks everything out in kind of logical groupings. So I can see everything from, software to hardware, container hosts, whether they be mid-range hosts. It could be a mainframe device. You'll see these are rack controllers for Dell racks, right? Sun blades, things like that. You'll be able to dive into the details for each of these just by clicking on the appropriate data type. So let's take, for example, a network device, like I mentioned, and you'll see everything in here from, and again, this is all agentlessly, everything from Cisco switches to F5 load balancers, right? Citrix NetScaler, Brocade switches, you name it. It's going to pick up everything on the network. Now, I can click on any one of these devices, and you'll show me it starts to bring up the graphical interface that I mentioned. And this is the big key, is not only understanding that I have 200 switches or 200 servers out there, but how are they actually talking to each other? How are they connected? And you'll notice when I bring up the details for this particular Cisco switch, which is centered here in the router, in the center, then it shows me via each of these little relationships lines that this Cisco switch is attached to a series of edge routers that are also in my CMDB. So I can see how they're connected. Now, if I scroll down to the bottom of this page while I have this Cisco node selected, then you'll see it also provides me all of the details for that particular node. Right? I've got a Cisco 3750 switch, Cisco systems, model number, et cetera, object class, all the details. One of the nice features of BMC Discovery is it allows you to see the provenance for the device, for that information. You can hide it. You'll see it's up here in the top right. So I could hide it or I could show it. And you'll notice when I show it, when I come down here, it essentially cuts off a column over here on the right. It just shows me the information that's been returned. When I actually look at the provenance, what it does is it allows me to see how that information was actually gathered. How do I know that this is a Cisco switch? Well, I can see from the latest access we ran on the device, we ran a device info command, and it shows me right here exactly what information that Cisco switch returned. From this information, we were able to determine that it's a Cisco 3750 switch. So that provenance, in many cases, can be critical in allowing you to understand not only is this the correct data, but how did we gather this information? How did we come to know that this was a particular switch or a particular model? And so that provenance information will actually show you the commands that are issued and the results that they receive from that box so that you can interrogate it directly if you have questions or you have concerns about it. Now, one of the other features that I really like about BMC Discovery, beyond being able to capture this graphic, and one thing I'll stop and say here is this is the kind of important information that you're looking for in FootPrints, right? When you go to your change request and you click on impact analysis, right? It's these relationships that you see here that are being discovered that are going to tell you what's upstream and what's downstream. Can I lose the edge switch? Can I lose the Cisco router? You know, what's going to happen in either case? These are the things that will enable that impact analysis and footprints to actually be functional, to be usable. Because of course, if I just had a list of hosts, if I just had a list of all of these edge switch devices here, and you'll see I could drill into any one of those and look at the details for the edge switch or this rack controller. But it wouldn't necessarily tell me how is it connected to the switch, on which port, is it up, is it down, is it functional. So by taking this information and discovering it here, this is the same info that we synchronize with footprints. So that when you're in a ticket and you get a call related to a system or a server or a particular application, that this same graphical diagram you see here is available to them through the incident form, through the change request form, through the CMDB, so that without having to give them access to BMC Discovery, they can get access to the information, but we're not having to manage additional IDs and passwords and security profiles, etc. We just simply take the information we gather here, we push it into the CMDB and give them direct access to it there. So BMC Discovery goes out and keeps it up to date. Your users of the service desk can focus on leveraging that information, referring to it, looking at it, and using it to troubleshoot, resolve problems, do change impact analysis, whatever the case may be. Now I'm going to go back to the home page again, and I'm going to show you another really important feature, a critical feature for a lot of users that I think is seldom used but very important, and that's the ability to compare assets in your environment easily. And I always use the case of SQL. So you'll see there's a little search box in the top. Very powerful search engine that I can use to search against anything. If I'm looking for anything by, IIS, Oracle, Adobe, whatever the case may be, I can search against that, and it's going to show me everything related to it. There may be databases out there. There may be instances of SQL actually running, right? It kind of breaks it down into those same categories. But let's take, for instance, a particular instance of SQL Server, right? It'll show me it. It shows me, in this case, everywhere I've got a copy of Microsoft SQL Server running on a particular, host or instance here. Shows me the version, right? And again, the host information over here. But let's say, for example, that I have a particular server that is misbehaving. It's not functioning properly. And let's say it's this Microsoft Link server as an example. Well, I can pull that up in the graphic, just like we saw before, and I can see all the details, down below in terms of, how it's configured, et cetera, et cetera. Pardon me. And before I leave here, let me show you one other piece of information before I continue, and that's highlighted in pink right here. And this is important in a lot of cases. This is what we call our extended data. The extended data means that we actually go to Microsoft, we go to Oracle, we go to Adobe, and we pull down via API all of their product info. So if there's a product that they currently have on the shelf or in use that's out there that has been flagged as end of support or end of life, then you'll notice we actually flag those dates for you here in the discovered data. So that I know, well, in this case, obviously, I'm out of both extended support and basic support. But the intent for that is, that you can get that information months, if not years in advance, so you can start planning for upgrades. And those are reports you usually see. Show me all my SQL servers that are out of extended support. Show me all my SQL servers that are end of life. And that way you can easily pull up the equipment that needs to be addressed and updated quickly. Going back to what I was talking about before, is if I have this particular SQL server that is misbehaving in some way, not functioning properly, then one of the things I can do is I can actually say I want to compare this device to another device. And I could search out other SQL servers, or in my case, I actually know I have a SQL server that I call Custard out there. And you'll see it searches them out, right? You can see there's several things running on Custard, so it's a part of a cluster, it's doing several things. But here's my Microsoft SQL Server. I can select that other SQL server and have it compare them. And the nice thing it does is it brings it up in a column-by-column comparison. I can see every configuration item for each of these servers to be able to see, are there differences in, the hosts that are connecting? Are there differences in the servers that are running? What processes are, kicking off on the box? How old is the machine? Version information, a lot of detail that I can now scroll through to see, where the potential problem may lie. I've got one box that's working, one box that's failing. Where are we going wrong? What are the differences between the two? And that can be done with your switches, your printers, your routers, your hosts, everything you've got in the CMDB. So this is one of those features that I like to point out, because anytime you've got a critical problem or an issue and you've got some kind of a gold standard, a gold configuration, something that just runs the way it should all the time, this is a great way to be able to pull them up side by side and say, well, where have we missed something, or what have we done wrong, and easily be able to ferret out the differences and figure out, what needs to be fixed. You can even dive down, you can see, to differing levels to figure out, if there's a difference in the software running, well, what is that? And I can continue comparing those applications on these devices by drilling down until I finally figure out, what it is I'm looking for. So that comparison tool is something that I find is invaluable in a production environment, in being able to easily, determine, what the problem is with a particular device versus having to, dig and look for it for weeks or longer. Now, same thing applies, as I mentioned, for software. So being able to not only relate the hosts to each other, but where do I have IIS running? Where do I have SQL? Where is Apache Tomcat running, etc.? And I can do the same thing here. I can search out all my Tomcat not like that. I can search out all my Tomcat servers in the same way. All right, so I can see everywhere I've got Apache Tomcat running. All right. And for each one of these, if I wanted to pull up, that graphic, as I select that server, okay, then it's again going to bring up this graphic here. I'll try to make it a little more visible, so I can see exactly how that Tomcat server is configured. Now I can see the Tomcat server connected to the edge switch that is running a particular running a software pooling, IP pooling, and I can see the IP pool sitting here. It's a load balanced pool. And that in turn is contained, in a particular switch that's then contained on an F5 switch, a big iron switch. And again, with the ability, as I select any of these objects in the graphic or in my map, to be able to get that detailed information related to each of those devices down below. How is it configured? Are we worried about any end of life or end of support? And again, all of this information is stuff that you can gather without having to deploy a single agent to a single device. Now, you can go through and manually, you'll see right up here at the top, there's a modeling section where I can go through and say, model an application or model a device. And what this means is there may be devices or applications that are not a part of those technology updates that BMC provides, not in the 17,000. Most often, I should say, it applies to homegrown or custom-built software. So you're doing your own development in-house. It's not something that we're going to inherently understand out of the box, but it allows you to go through and create models for those applications. You can see I can go through what I've done here is I just started a blank model. And what I can do from here is I've got a drag and drop palette to start going and grabbing applications that have been found, other servers that have been found, and start dragging them in here and creating my own model physically, right? And being able to connect things the way that I want them and the way that I want to see them. And it even allows for customers to do this in what's called a team or a shared mode. And you'll see this right here on the desktop. You can see that the models themselves go through a process or a progression. And by that I mean, for a particular business service, for example, it may be supported by multiple, there may be SQL databases, there may be Oracle databases, there may be mid-tier servers, app servers, there may even be mainframe or other items involved. Not one person can necessarily go through there and model the entire business service from end to end. They may know the SQL part, but then when it comes to IIS or other components, they're not sure how they're related. So by creating this shared model, then I can go in and actually start creating applications or creating models that are unpublished that other groups can view. I might fill in my SQL part, and I pass it over to the next team member who fills in the application side, who fills in the UI and the infrastructure, and then ultimately that model can get published to the environment so that the next time you go through and you run a discovery scan, rather than missing that application or not being able to identify that application, it can now accurately tell you what it is, where it's located, what version, and start linking all of those components because you've essentially provided that fingerprint or built that model for it to be able to do so. You're not going to have to do it for most applications. Again, it's just really anything that's in-house development or custom built that's not going to be accommodated by one of those out-of-the-box fingerprints, but that allows you in that way to, to model anything that you want discovered so that you can find that information on an automated basis and you're not having to manually upkeep it. Now, I know we've got roughly about 15, 16, 17 minutes to go. I want to open it up at this point and see, do we have any questions from the audience? Are there any specific pieces of information or questions we can answer? Rich, is there a way we can open it to the floor?
Well, right now, the only question we had was from Jerry, and I think that you probably answered this. What tool is used for impact? Is it Discovery or BPPM? And I think you've pretty much covered that. But any other questions that anybody has, please go ahead and send them to us in the Q&A section, and we'll go ahead and get the answers and take advantage of the fact that Kyle's sharing his time with us today. So any questions out there?
Yeah, and while we're waiting for that, in terms of impact, again, you're really not doing the impact analysis is not a function of BMC Discovery. BMC Discovery is providing the information that would allow FootPrints or Remedy4s or any of the other tools that it connects into to be able to do that impact analysis. But what I will say is it is utilizing all of this relationship data that we see here in this graphic that BMC Discovery is picking up to determine the impact, right? If it's a piece of hosted software, then it stands to reason that if I lose the host, then I'm going to lose the hosted software that's running on that host. And so by being able to funnel these hosts and these relationships into FootPrints, it has the engine in it that can then troll these relationships so that when you're in there and you say, I'm making a change to, this particular host right here, INQ, IMPR01, it's able to take that host and then troll each of these relationships to tell you you're going to impact this database cluster, or it's going to take down this, you're going to lose this performance assurance agent. You may lose, capabilities with Blade Logic or Control M. There may be numerous things that are impacted. The key is that Discovery's not doing that. It's just providing the detail that allows FootPrints to accurately do that. Because if you don't have this, then you're in FootPrints manually creating those links and manually associating assets, which is near impossible.
Okay, and as far as BMC Discovery, what version is this that you've shown us?
The current version, you'll see right up here at the top, is 11.0. I think they have traditionally, BMC Discovery has about one major release a year with some patch releases in between. I know that this is 11.0 is fairly recent, where they've updated the graphical display that you see here. The colors, a lot of the graphics have been enhanced to make it more attractive and functional. And they're constantly going back and also updating, of course, not only the technology updates so that we can continue to discover brand new things that are being hardware, software being released, but also releasing new tools for discovery, for example. So you can see I can come in and say, let me look at, let's say, communication summary, right? This information is actually, we're not, and I think this is a key point, this is not a monitoring tool, right? So we're not sitting there constantly monitoring Tomcat, and we're not monitoring these servers. What we're doing is we're going out on some kind of scheduled basis, and we're taking a snapshot, and we're saying, as of 8 o'clock this morning, or as of 12 o'clock this afternoon, this is the way this server was configured. And we're actually able to read all of those configuration files out of a particular server, like Apache Tomcat, for instance, and determine, what IP addresses are open, what ports is it talking on, and we can in turn go to that IP address and that port and find out what's listening on the other end. Oh, it's a server. Well, what's it doing? And that's the way that it gathers that map. So it's not actually looking at communications on the network, which is very different. So it's non-intrusive in that we're not sniffing packets and we're not constantly out there pinging things all day long. What we're doing is we're looking at a box and we're saying these configuration files point to the following SQL servers or the following addresses. Let's go to those addresses and see what's on that port on the other side that's talking. And we can slowly build out that map just by following the breadcrumbs from device and application to application without having to be constantly on the network, looking at traffic.
Okay, now we've got a couple of questions that have popped up, actually a few. What is the integration between Discovery and FootPrints? I noticed Pentaho, is that correct? And then question mark Spoon.
Yep. Let me go back real fast and address that. It's a great question. So to integrate to FootPrints, there's a couple different methods. The one I'm illustrating here is what's called Pentaho. And
we've lost your screen, Kyle.
Oh, sorry. I might need to.
It's okay.
Let me see if I can get it back here. There we go. All right. So let me show you this one more time. So here I illustrated Pentaho, and whoever mentioned that, you're absolutely right. It's also called Spoon or Kettle, which you'll find them. But that is an open source tool. It's downloadable. You'll probably find it on thousands of websites. It's everywhere. It is an ETL tool, a transaction loading tool. And Pentaho, consider it the black box. That would be a black box that's installed on premises that would connect into your FootPrint CMDB, and on the other end would connect to BMC Discovery. And there's numerous methods for that. There's API. You can do API connections. You can do direct database to database, or ODBC connections, because these both run on relational databases. There's different ways you can pull it in, but we have pre-built the out-of-the-box integration using Spoon or Kettle or Pentaho data integration. I think that's all the terms you could use, so that you don't have to go through that mapping exercise. You can use Pentaho or Spoon for anything, but what we've done is we've just taken it and we've automatically built the integration to Discovery so that without you having to go through and integrate it yourself, if you've got FootPrints up and running and you deploy BMC Discovery and we start discovering stuff, we put Pentaho in, which may take 30 minutes. provide an ID and a password to FootPrints and to your Discovery server, and within an hour, you've got the information moving from the Discovery tool into the FootPrints CMDB. It's that simple. Now, you can always go back and massage that interface if there's more data you want or less, but we provide the out-of-the-box to give you all the key information without having to go through that exercise.
Okay, is it a push or pull integration from Spoon to Discovery?
It is a pull integration. Now, it can be a push. I mean, let me mention this. The discoveries can be done in a couple different ways. They can be done on a schedule. Discover these devices once a day, discover these devices once every couple hours, discover these once a week, or it can be triggered, meaning that the minute you discover something new, push the information up so that we're looking at the latest. And also keeping in mind that throughout the interface, both in FootPrints as well as within BMC Discovery, there are always those buttons to say rescan now. So if you're ever in doubt at what you're looking at or the accuracy or the timing of it, you can always immediately rescan, that subnet or even one device at a time if it's something you're dealing with. My point about the push is for customers on the phone that have virtual environments, it's even more active. The more virtualized you are, the better this tool is going to perform for you. And by that, I mean that every time you do, obviously with virtual environments, they move much quicker than physical. Things tend to appear and disappear sometimes within minutes or hours if necessary. And so when you're running on a discovery schedule of, say, like 24 hours, you may miss things within that 24-hour period. There may be 20 servers that come up and go down, and you never even knew that they were there. With Discovery, it actually has a triggering mechanism for virtual devices. I mentioned earlier that we talk directly to vCenter and ESX through their API. Every time you do something with one of those solutions, it kicks off what's called a vMotion event. It's basically like an SNMP trap that it kicks out, and it tells, here's a new IP address, a new host name on this blade in this rack. And so what BMC Discovery does is it actually captures that vMotion event, determines what the IP address and the host name is, and it initiates an immediate discovery of that IP. So if you were to bring up a virtual server within a couple minutes, we already know about it and have inventoried it, and it's already in the CMDB. If 30 minutes later it gets torn down because it's no longer needed, then another vMotion event gets sent out from vCenter that says this blade or this instance is no longer there, and we can rip it out of the database immediately. So in that respect, with virtual environments, the more virtualized you are, the more real-time your discovery is. If you were 100% virtualized, then everything would be pushed based on those vMotion events. But for customers anywhere in between, you're going to be able to capture and keep track of virtual systems even better than you will the physical.
Okay, in regards to the Credential Vault, is there an option to integrate into industry Credential Vault such as CyberArk? And another question, so the discovery of new VMs is kicked off by itself. I think that follows up what you were talking about too.
Yes. So the discovery of new VMs would be automatic, right? The minute that VM comes up, it's going to notify, it basically notifies vCenter, right? And vCenter then notifies BMC Discovery through that API. So the minute something comes up or goes down, or it's moved from one blade to another, you move them around, all of that information will be captured near real time from vCenter and will be updated in the CMDB. Absolutely. And I'm sorry, Rich, repeat that. What was the first part to that one?
In regards to Credential Vault, is there an option to integrate into industry Credential Vault such as CyberArk?
I don't know of any integrations today to the Credential Vault. As of today, all the credentials would need to be stored in that Credential Vault. There's no integration to be able to pull, kind of like almost single sign-on type functionality for BMC Discovery. Everything would have to be put into the vault. But as I mentioned, those individuals who, if there's one or multiple, they can get a console and they can put in the credentials and enter them and if, you know, as long as nobody's looking over their shoulder, those get encrypted with 256-bit AES keys, and from that point forward, those credentials are no longer available or visible to anybody except for the running processes of BMC Discovery.
Okay, and are there any other questions? We've got a couple more moments left. You know, great audience participation today. I want to thank you, everyone, for your questions and giving Kyle a run for his money here. And if there are no more questions, I'm going to give everybody a few minutes back into their day. And thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend it with Flycast partners. And Kyle, thank you for a great presentation today, sir.
You're very welcome. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.